So I started serving God when I was about 9 years old. We had a revival in my hometown at my dad's church. A pastor by the name of Ricky Walden came to our church and held a revival. I don't think we had any converts in that revival at all. He actually ended up leaving the the revival and going back home. And while they were on their way home, God started dealing with my little heart as a 9-year-old boy. And I was homeschooling with my mom. And so I got down, I told mom, I said, I feel like I need to pray. And so I prayed and I asked Jesus into my heart. I remember the day so vividly, so well. Just like, like it was almost yesterday. And throughout life, I would serve God, and I would get close to God, and then I would drift away. I'd get close to God, and then I'd drift away. About 13 years old, we moved back to Kansas from Missouri, and I started going to a Bible school. About this time, I started getting real steeped heavily into pornography, mainly through the internet. And it had a real steep hold on me, and even into my adulthood. So as time would progress, I would get friends and stuff, and I got real close to this one friend of mine. His name was Chris McCormick, and Chris ended up being about 14 years old. And we spent a whole entire summer together. I was about almost 5 years older than he was, and we spent a whole entire summer together and had a great time, just having a blast. Doing crazy stuff, climbing the water towers and going swimming at the public pool in the middle of the night and stuff like that. We had a great time, but as time would progress, we started going to the Bible school, and we was driving back and forth to the Bible school, and one day it was really foggy out, and I kind of thought to myself, maybe we should just stay home today. Maybe we should just wait until the fog clears up, and I thought, no. We need to get to school. I've got important things. I've got girls I've got to see at school, and so we took off and started down the road, and we got down the road, and it was so foggy, and I was probably going about 55 in a 65-mile-an-hour speed zone. And I remember it so vividly. You couldn't see in front of you more than probably 20 feet. I mean, the fog was so incredibly dense, and it was so dense that if you were to see taillights ahead of you, you couldn't see them until you were almost right up on the car. And I had passed a car that was going pretty slow, and I had pulled back into the other lane, and it was probably going about 55, probably faster than I should have. But I remember I glanced down at something on the floor for just a second, and I looked back up to see headlights directly in front of me, and I did the only thing I knew to do, and I swerved to the left, to the left, and we ended up hitting passenger side on both sides, and my friend died of brain trauma. The ironic thing is that I actually knew the people who were in the other vehicle, and it was a lady that I was affiliated with through church, and she ended up dying also, and it was traumatic, but she was ready to go, which is another amazing story within itself, because of the things that I heard, that she had a dream that she was gonna die, and she ended up going to heaven. I'm really sure of that. However, time would progress, and the doctors would diagnose me with severe depression. So it caused me a lot of anxiety and a lot of depression through this time shortly after this. And I actually wrote a poem about it shortly thereafter, about how sorry I was that it had to be him, and that I wished it would have been me instead of him. And for about 15 years, I would blame myself for the wreck and everything that happened, until finally, God would show me why that had to be. And I'll explain that a little bit later as my testimony progresses. Um, so I begin. I begin. So after that, they diagnosed me with bipolar disorder. During about this time, I grew very, very, very angry with God, and to the point that I just completely denied Him and said, "There is no such thing. There is no God. I don't believe in Him at all." And I don't believe there was a God whatsoever. And I went several months that way until I got to a point where I got to thinking, no, that can't be right. There has to be something else. There has to be a God. And so I began to study other religions, and through studying other religions, I became what they call agnostic and believing there's more than one God. And so I began studying all these different religions and dabbled in just about everything you can imagine. I've read excerpts of the Quran. I've read parts of the Satanic Bible. I've just done a lot of research on a lot of religions, and the conclusion I finally came to is that every religion holds an element of truth. Now, it's not the exact truth, but it holds just an element of truth, just enough to get people sidetracked. And here's a fact statement that I'm going to tell everybody, and I firmly believe this to be true. Every religion, for every religion, there is one God. Every religion points to one God. Every religion, let me say that again. Every religion points to one God. And in fact, there are several paths that lead to God, but there is only one way to God. There's only one way to God. There are several paths that lead to God, but there's only one way to God. And so as time would progress, I would come to the realization that Christianity was the way to go, and I'd eventually come back to God. I got married and had 3 beautiful children, which are bugging me to death right now, and they should be asleep. But we got a divorce, and I've been divorced now for 5 years. So we're going to fast forward through a few of those years. Once again, me waxing and waning through the Christian life. Just kind of ho-hum and doing my thing and serving God whenever I wanted, pretty much, and not really wholeheartedly. And so we'll fast forward to about 2017, January 28th, 2017. We'll back up just a few months before that. I went through a real bad breakup, and it was really traumatic on me, and it really just pushed me over the brink of sanity. And in fact, if a doctor were to look at the whole situation, he would have probably said he is clinically insane. It ended me up in Osawatomie State Hospital. And on January 28th, I was put in an isolation chamber. Now, I've been told, I've tried to gather as much information about that day as I could have, because I've since been back to Osawatomie State Hospital. But on January 28th, 2017, I was put in isolation, and I kept refusing the meds, and they told me, if you don't stop refusing the meds, we're going to have to give you a shot. Well, I didn't want a shot. I was told there was about 7 people that came in there to the isolation chamber and tried to administer a shot to me. And what I remember is I had been praying and battling back and forth with what was right and what was wrong with God. And for once in my life, for the very first time in my life, I feel like I gave God complete control of my life. Now, this is what I remember. I remember being pushed over towards the wall, and with the momentum of everybody trying to restrain me, I climbed the wall and went parallel to the floor. And while I was doing that, I screamed in as loud as a voice as I can tell, in the name of Jesus. And immediately, I threw open my hand, and immediately as I said that, everything and everybody, as I recall it, fell to the floor. That's all I remember. From that point on was just kind of a nice bliss, if you will. And everything hit the floor. So this is what I've been told from other sources. A veteran of 12 years said, man, I've seen a lot of things. And he said, that was the most horriblest, god-awful scream I have ever heard in my entire life. He said it literally sent chills through my body. I was told by another guy who was probably Muslim. His name was Muhammad. They call him Mo. No. The next time I seen him at Osawatomie, he said, "Oh boy, it's David again. Here we go again." But I was told by him that he said he was acting almost like an animal. He said, you were growling at me. You wouldn't even hardly let me near you. And he told me later, he said, you actually hurt a guy. He said his back was out of shape. He was out of work for 5 weeks. You put him out of shape, and I don't even remember doing this. He said, you weren't trying to fight us. He said, you were just resisting us to the point that we couldn't give you the medicine without, he said, you weren't throwing punches or anything. You were just, just trying to get away from us. He said, it wasn't like you were trying to fight us. But at that point, I remember that point ever so vividly. And that's a point that I say I went parallel to the floor, and somewhere in midair, I found the Lord. It's a day that is always going to stay out in the memory of my mind, because it was the day that I gave everything to God. And I hit the floor, and they stuck me with the shots. And in all reality, they said I should have been out for the next 12 to 24 hours with these shots, this cocktail of shots that they gave me. They said, you should have been out. And they said literally within hours, I got up and was walking the floors and was talking normally. When I came in, I couldn't even talk to people legibly. I was having trouble communicating. I was so out of it. And they said literally within 3 days you had made such a turnaround, and they literally sent me home within 3 days. Now, within 3 days, I got home and I realized I was on the same medicines that I went in with on lower dosages. For example, some of my medicines were like at 60 milligrams. I came out on 40 milligrams. And I get home and I expect everybody to be, oh, Isaac, we're sorry. How are you doing? I expected people to check up on me, because this is not my first time in a mental institution, and this is always how it happens. People show you sympathy and show you that they care. On the contrary, this time, the contrary. In fact, when I started getting home, people started deserting me. Friends started leaving me. I expected them to come over and say, "Hey, man, we're sorry. We feel for you, and we're there for you if you need us, and anything." And the exact opposite started happening, and I started freaking out. I started wondering what's going on. And I started questioning God. Why are you allowing this to happen? What are you doing to me? My friends are supposed to be here for me. I need my friends. And through it all, over a year's time, God started showing me that I don't need anybody. I only need him. And man, it was the most terrifying, horrible part of my life. It was excruciating, the pain that I had to deal with and come through over a lifetime of pain and regret and everything, that God started dealing with me and showing me what he was doing with me, and he started healing me. So the very first thing that I did when I got home, I used to have people over to my house all the time. Like all the time I would have people at my house. And so I sent out a text and I said, hey, I'm going to watch a movie tonight. I am unashamed. You guys should come over to watch it. And I don't remember how many people I sent it to, but not a single person showed up or even responded to that text. Not a single person ever did. And I was crushed at first, and I thought, you know what? No big deal. I'm going to watch it anyways. I don't care, you know. And I watched that movie, which is a very moving movie. I wish people would just watch that movie. I mean, it's an amazing movie. It's about the girl that was in the Columbine shooting. She was an amazing person for Jesus. And as the movie played and finished, I began praying and asking God about certain things, and I began asking God about, why did the wreck have to happen, God? That was so painful for me, you know, after all these years, 15 years, I had been suicidal and tried to commit suicide, 15 over, I don't know how many times. I've got scars all over my body from the times I've tried to commit suicide. And for the first time in my life, I began asking God, why did that wreck have to happen? And God whispered to me so sweetly. He said, Isaac, do you remember the prayer you prayed for your friend Chris right before he died? And immediately my eyes were opened. You see, a couple weeks before Chris died, I had went to the church and began praying for him, because Chris wasn't living a very godly life. He was actually doing some drinking and alcohol, and he was sleeping with a girl and stuff. And I began praying for Chris, and I began praying for his soul. And I remember praying these words exactly. I prayed, finally I got to the point after being a few hours at the church praying for my friend Chris. I got to the point where I prayed, whatever it takes to get him to heaven. And literally, less than 2 weeks later, my friend Chris died. That was the end of his story. And I always wondered, why did Chris have to die at 14 years old? Why? He was so young. He had so much to offer people. He was funny. He was a brilliant person to be around. He's so much fun to be around. Why did he have to die? And then I realized Chris's story ended because God wanted him in heaven. And then God was like, you see it now, Isaac. You're alive. Your story is going on. And that's when God started healing me of all these pains and all these regrets. January 28th is when I went parallel to the floor and found the Lord. And since then, I've not been suicidal one time. I haven't had suicidal thoughts. I can't explain that. I went to Osawatomie, the state hospital, just about 2 weeks ago, and I told them exactly what happened in an Osawatomie State Hospital, and I looked at them and I said, I haven't been suicidal for 1 year. And I said, I've got people on the outside who will testify to that fact. My parents, who I would call in the middle of the night saying, I'm done, I'm finished, I'm not going to go through with it anymore. Haven't received those calls in over a year. There's no explanation for that, my friends. There's no explanation for that. I don't know where God's going to take me with all this. You know, I thought God could heal me of bipolar. I don't know. I'm not putting that past him. I think that God has much bigger plans for me. I think that if he does decide to heal me, it's going to be on a massive scale, and there's going to be so much publicity. that the devil is just going to be so angry about it. I don't know if he'll ever choose to heal me outright. We're just going to wait and see. For right now, we're going to take the medicine. I want to thank all my friends and family who I've just recently got out of Osawatomie State Hospital because I tried to go off my medicines, thinking God would just heal me just like that. And God has other plans for me. I'm not even sure what those plans are, but I want to thank God, and I want to thank my friends and family, and all my people on Facebook who have continually just showed me how much you love and care about me. It really is amazing to me. And as you can see, I have every reason to live right here. I have every reason to live. This is one of the main reasons. And I told my girls here a while back, girls, do you remember when I told you about my medicine? I pinky promised I'm not gonna just go cold turkey off my medicine anymore, didn't I? Yeah. And didn't Daddy say I pinky promised never to do suicide either?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there you have it. Pinky promise is like swearing on a Bible to us. We hold our promises very true. Let your yays be yay and your nays be nay. I want to thank God for what he's doing in my life. He's also showing me how to deal with anxiety. I'm going to be posting more videos on how he's doing that with me pretty soon. Hope you guys enjoy this. I love him so much. He's done so much for us. Peace in. Abba love. Ike out.